Hey everyone, Dana White has finally announced the UFC 317 main event. So, International Fight Week will be headlined by Ilia versus Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title. So, the matchup we kind of expected to come with JDM winning the welterweight title. Dana said that Islam vs JDM is pretty much made. It's just they're going to figure out a date and location. Um, I didn't expect Makhachev to vacate. I also don't think he was stripped. I think the UFC will most likely put in a position where Topuria wasn't going to fight unless it was an undisputed title. And they just kind of asked Makhachev to vacate, and if he wants to come back down, he'll get a title shot. I'm assuming that's what happened, and fair enough, right? Vacant, interim, it doesn't really matter. It's just we're getting a title fight between Oliveira and Topuria. And this is great. This is wonderful. In terms of the matchup, I think Topuria is going to win by either second or third round as TKO KO. I think Charles' high guard is very static. I don't think he moves it around enough. And I think Topuria will land some really good body shots, and he might, get Oliveira to start dropping those hands, leave him more open, and then eventually he'll start pummeling shots over the top. Those long combinations are going to work really well against Oliveira because Oliveira, again, his dynamic defense is really more his offense, and I think Ilia can really have a lot of success in those long form exchanges. I think Oliveira has a lot of good tools to fight Topuria. I think the way he mixes in front kicks and knee stomps is really quite excellent. I think his knees in the clinch, especially to the body, and that collar tie uppercut is going to work really, really well. And I think it's going to be a very competitive fight up until Ilia finds that shot. And I think big thing as well is Ilia is not afraid to go to the ground. If you have that power and you have that jiu-jitsu skill and you're willing to go to the ground with Oliveira, we've seen like with Makhachev and with Sayukin, they do start to control the fight. And I think Topuria will be more than willing to go to the ground with someone like Oliveira. We've seen him do it against Ryan Hall. He's uber confident, and I respect that. Charles, while he doesn't entirely look like he is slowing down, he is 35, 36, around that range where you do start to decline a little bit. And I think that just works in Ilia's favor, and I do think his power will translate pretty well. I think it's more the targeting and his willingness to go to the ground that will win him this matchup. Then, the co-main event is Alexander Pantoja, the, for some reason, 10th pound fighter. It's ridiculous. Versus Kai Kara-France. Again, the matchup we saw coming was originally in April, but then they pushed it back to International Fight Week. So, Kai presents some interesting issues in the fact that he does have decent power, and he is a very good anti-grappler. He'll be put in bad positions a lot, but he's really good at surviving them. We've seen him countless times have someone on his back, either standing or on the ground, and him being able to just fight off a choke for like 3 minutes straight with no issue at all. And that will do good against Pantoja, but the thing is, when it's on the feet, Kai, despite his nickname, isn't really a lights out kind of guy. His KO over Cody Garbrandt, no, his KO over Rogerio, I can't remember his last name, but his KO at UFC 259 was the first KO of his UFC career. He only has, I believe, 3 in the UFC. One against Garbrandt, one against Rogerio, and the other against Steve Erceg. And technique for technique, he isn't some sort of wizard on the feet either. I've seen Moreno strike him. I've seen Royval have a lot of success. He isn't like... He's similar to Dan Hooker in the sense that even though he's from CKB, he isn't some unbeatable striker like Adesanya or like Volkanovski. There's definitely like holes in his game. And the difference is against guys like with Kai Kara-France, against guys like Askar Askarov, Rogerio, Amir Albazi, their jiu-jitsu threat isn't too high. Like, they're mainly trying to wrestle and then go for the submissions. I think Pantoja is a very, very savvy and sneaky jiu-jitsu player who does have extremely good wrestling. He's one of the few guys that identifies as a jiu-jitsu fighter, but really does have solid and creative wrestling. And I think he will be able to submit Kai. I think maybe in the second or third round, I think Kai will survive for a bit, but Pantoja will make the necessary adjustments and eventually find that choke. I do think Kai could give him some trouble on the feet. There might be some moments where he lands a big shot, gets Pantoja a bit wary, but then eventually Pantoja just kind of works around, returns with his own, or goes under for a takedown, but I do think Pantoja will win that one. The rest of the card is a bit hit and miss. We've got Manel Cap versus Brandon Royval, which is a great matchup. Roman Kopylov versus Paulo Costa, amazing. And then Hanato Moicano versus Beneil Dariush, great fight. But there are 2 or 3 spots left, and Dana has said that there are a few other fights that are being worked on. And for International Fight Week, it needs a bit more beef. So what I think they're going to do is I think Caio Borralho versus Nassourdine Imavov, really just with that fight, the card's good, right? It's solid. You got that as a feature fight, then you got Cap versus Royval, and then you got Costa versus Krylov. In terms of like another matchup I'd chuck on that card, maybe something a bit like Prates versus Jeff Neal. I think would be a good fight if Neal isn't still injured. But they seem to be working on what's going on for that card. Now, UFC 319's main event got announced. It is still in Chicago. It's going to be Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev. We knew this fight was happening. We thought it was going to be on International Fight Week. There was a bit of a scare thinking Dricus was injured. Apparently that's not the case, but they've scheduled that for UFC 319. I do favor du Plessis just because I think Khamzat's cardio isn't awful, but I think under the pace that du Plessis puts, it will be. And Derrida has also trained with both men, and he has stated that, outside of that first round, it's going to be a rough night for Chimaev. Dricus has excelled in both the grappling and the striking, mixing together, putting a pace on people, and he's really delivered to a very high degree, outstriking some of the best people in the UFC and looking extremely savvy on the ground against guys like Whitaker and Brunson, and really just impressing and game planning well. I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked. He game plans extremely, extremely well for his opponents, especially like guys like Strickland and Adesanya. He did really, really well, so I do think he will win that fight. Tough first round, maybe like a 4th round finish, or even a decision if Chimaev can survive. Yeah, these are some really interesting matchups. We figured that all of these were going to be made, but just to have them finally announced was really great. Also on top of that, Marlon Vera is out of his fight with Mario Batista at UFC 316, and apparently they are getting a replacement, and Burt MMA has said that replacement is very, very interesting. So I think it's going to be one of two things. I think it's either going to be Petr Yan, who the UFC was trying to get against Marcus McGee in Abu Dhabi. I think they could have just swapped him and put him against Mario Batista instead a little bit earlier. I would love that matchup. I think that would cause Mario Batista to get killed, and thank God. Or Patchy Mix is a free agent. The PFL has released him finally, and I think, a top 10 guy on a pay-per-view with other bantamweights, not a too high-ranked matchup, but just a good enough one to sort of gauge his skill level. I think that would be absolutely perfect to get him in the UFC. And I would actually really quite love that now thinking about it. So yeah, these matchups are great. They all point to Islam versus JDM and some just really great matchups on the lightweight division. We can get Ilia versus Aman Sayukian versus Justin Gaethje. There are some really, really great things going on with these divisions. And it's really interesting because this is probably the first time in UFC history where we've had champions in weight classes next to each other vacate their titles and move up, respectively. And not just being stripped, but choosing to vacate and go up. It's really, really interesting. And it's created a beautiful scenario in the divisions where we're getting these contenders, just a logjam, to fight each other and create just an absolute murderer's row of people to fight for the title. And I think it's really, really great and does a lot of great things for the UFC in the long run. Still no announcement on Aspinall versus Jones. I honestly think they're just waiting until it's a little bit closer to November to announce that. MSG, it seems like the only logical choice for that fight at this point, and they can't really announce the MSG fight in all the way back in May. So they'll probably announce that fight, around July or August, and we'll just get an idea of when that is. I do think that fight's going to happen eventually. I hope so. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to talk about the matchups and the announcements that were made. Give me your thoughts on them in the comments down below, and like and subscribe. See you guys later.